A wealthy man sneers as Marcus bends over a trash bin, pulling out broken glass and twisted metal. Pathetic, the man mutters under his breath. But what he doesn't know is that the very trash he mocks will soon be transformed into masterpieces worth millions, and the world will be lining up to own what Marcus creates. By the end of this story, the question won't be who Marcus is. It'll be how they ever underestimated him. The sun hung low, casting an amber hue over the streets as Marcus pushed his creaky cart down a bustling sidewalk. His silhouette, hunched over the mismatched wheels, blended into the shadows of the towering buildings around him. The city roared with life. Expensive cars zipped by, their drivers not sparing Marcus a glance. To them, he was invisible. With every step, Marcus scanned the streets like a treasure hunter on a mission. His eyes, sharp and full of focus, darted toward a pile of discarded furniture by the curb. An old chair caught his attention. Its wooden legs were chipped, and the fabric on the seat was torn, but Marcus didn't see trash. He saw potential. Carefully, he placed it atop his cart, adjusting it to fit alongside a rusted lamp and a box of broken glass. "Hey, you can't just pick through that. This isn't a dump." A sharp voice broke through the air. Marcus turned to see a man in a suit glaring at him from the doorway of a boutique. "Apologies," Marcus said softly, tipping his head in respect. He gripped the cart's handle tighter and walked away. The humiliation stung, but Marcus had no time for anger. He had work to do. The cart rattled as he moved, each squeak a reminder of his daily grind. Marcus wasn't just collecting discarded items. He was collecting stories. Every piece he picked up held a narrative, and in his small, cluttered workshop, he'd transformed them into something extraordinary. As he crossed into an upscale neighborhood, the contrast was jarring. Marble facades gleamed under the setting sun, and manicured lawns framed houses that seemed too perfect to be lived in. A jogger glanced at Marcus, her expression a mix of pity and disdain. He caught her look but didn't flinch. "Just keep moving," Marcus muttered to himself. He reached another pile of trash, spotting a cracked mirror and a stack of old picture frames. Gently he picked them up, careful not to break the fragile glass. As he added them to his cart, a child passing by with his mother pointed at Marcus. "Mom, why's he taking trash?" "Come on, don't stare," the mother whispered, tugging the boy along. Marcus heard every word, but he wasn't bitter. If anything, the child's curiosity reminded him why he did this. Where others saw garbage, Marcus saw beauty. He knew that even the broken could become something breathtaking. He finally reached his studio, a small, dimly lit room tucked in a forgotten corner of the city. The walls were lined with shelves holding scraps of wood, bent metal, and shards of glass. To the untrained eye, it was chaos, but to Marcus, it was a symphony waiting to be composed. As he unloaded his finds, he whispered to himself, "One day they'll see." And as the room filled with the faint hum of his tools, Marcus began to turn trash into treasure. Marcus wiped his brow, beads of sweat mixing with the faint traces of paint smeared on his dark, calloused hands. The little room he called his studio was alive with movement. Scraps of wood clattered onto his workstation, jars of mismatched nails and screws lined the shelves, and a faint whir of sandpaper filled the air. He examined the cracked mirror he'd salvaged earlier, his fingers tracing the jagged edge of the glass. Most would see a broken reflection, but to Marcus, it was the start of a story. He reached for a piece of driftwood he'd collected weeks ago and held it up to the light, tilting his head. "Now, what are you trying to say?" he murmured to himself, as if the materials could answer back. The driftwood's curves reminded him of waves, and he began to piece together an image in his mind. Slowly, the vision took shape. He could see it, a mosaic of broken glass arranged to mimic the sea, framed by the weathered wood. Hours melted away as Marcus worked, his hands moving with precision and grace. His tools weren't state-of-the-art, just old chisels, pliers, and brushes he'd collected over the years. But it wasn't the tools that mattered, it was the vision. Stacks of unfinished projects surrounded him, a chair he'd reupholstered with vibrant, mismatched fabric, a rusted lamp base that now gleamed with a fresh coat of gold paint. Each piece carried his signature, a blend of grit, imagination, and raw emotion. It wasn't just art to Marcus. It was a second chance. His daughter, Chloe, peeked her head into the room, a curious smile spreading across her face. "Dad, still working?" she asked, stepping inside. Marcus grinned, setting down his brush. "What do you think?" She tilted her head, inspecting the mosaic he was working on. "It looks alive," she said softly. "That's the goal," Marcus replied, pride swelling in his chest. Chloe always saw his work for what it truly was, more than just salvage junk. You should show people, she said, crossing her arms. Like really show them. Marcus chuckled. I don't think the world's ready for this old man's trash art. Chloe frowned. It's not trash, Dad. It's brilliant. Her words lingered in the air long after she left the room. Marcus stared at the mosaic, her voice echoing in his mind. Maybe Chloe was right. Maybe it was time to share his work. The next morning, Marcus ventured into the heart of the city, carting one of his finished pieces, a restored coffee table adorned with a stained glass top. He walked into a local gallery, his heart pounding. The gallery owner, a sleek woman named Marcy, looked up from her desk. Her perfectly arched brow rose as she eyed Marcus, noting his worn jeans and paint-splattered jacket. Can I help you? She asked, her tone clipped. Marcus set the table down gently. I was wondering if you'd take a look at this. Marcy approached reluctantly, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Her eyes widened as she examined the piece, running her fingers over the intricate glasswork. She looked up at Marcus, her skepticism replaced with curiosity. Where did you get this? I made it, Marcus said simply. Marcy studied him for a moment, her gaze softening. It's stunning. You've got something special here. Marcus nodded, his lips curling into a faint smile. For the first time, someone outside his little world saw what he saw. And in that moment, Marcus realized Chloe was right. It wasn't just art. It was a gift waiting to be shared. Marcus carefully set up his booth at the local art fair, his hands steady but his heart filled with nerves. The space was cramped, his display modest compared to the polished and extravagant setups of high-end vendors surrounding him. His sculptures, crafted from discarded scrap metal, old wood, and broken glass, stood proudly on the simple wooden table he had borrowed. While others displayed sleek contemporary art with glossy price tags, Marcus's booth felt out of place. Yet to him it represented resilience, creativity, and untold stories. As the fair buzzed with chatter, affluent patrons roamed, their designer shoes clicking on the tiled floor. Marcus tried to ignore the disapproving glances and subtle smirks from other vendors. He focused instead on his art, adjusting the placement of a piece that resembled a phoenix rising from ashes. Maya, his 14-year-old daughter, stood by his side watching everything with a mix of pride and protectiveness. Dad, your work is incredible, Maya said softly. Her voice carried a quiet determination, as though she were trying to convince both of them. Marcus gave her a small smile. It's not about impressing them, baby. It's about the message. But the crowd around them didn't seem to care about messages. Patrons glanced at his work dismissively, most walking away without a word. Maya grew visibly frustrated, her arms crossed as she stood protectively by the table. Then came the moment Marcus had dreaded. A tall, sharply dressed man with silver hair approached, flanked by two women holding expensive handbags. His posture oozed confidence, but his expression was one of disdain. It was Mr. Brooks, a well-known real estate developer in the city, infamous for his snobbish attitude. He stopped at Marcus's booth, glancing at the sculptures as if they were a joke. Brooks chuckled loudly, drawing attention from others nearby. What is this supposed to be? He asked, pointing at one of Marcus's pieces, a sculpture of a tree made from old wires and bolts. Recycling day at the junkyard? Laughter rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Maya stiffened, her fists clenched. Marcus, however, stayed calm. It's called growth from ruins, he replied, his tone measured. It represents finding beauty and hope in the discarded. Brooks smirked. Well, good luck finding anyone willing to pay for this, he said, gesturing dismissively at the booth. He turned to his companions and added loudly, This belongs in a landfill, not an art fair. The group's laughter stung more than Marcus wanted to admit. Maya's face flushed with anger, and she opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus gently placed a hand on her shoulder. It's okay, Maya, he said quietly. Let it go. But Dad, It's not worth it, Marcus interrupted softly, though his chest ached from the humiliation. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus packed his sculptures in silence. Maya stood beside him, fuming. Why didn't you say something? She asked, her voice trembling. Marcus sighed, meeting her gaze. Because proving people like him wrong doesn't happen with words, Maya. It happens with actions. Just as they were about to leave, a middle-aged woman approached. Unlike the others, she wore a warm, encouraging smile. She pointed at Marcus's phoenix sculpture. "That's beautiful," she said. "You've got something special here. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The comment caught Marcus off guard. It was so simple, yet it reignited a small flame of hope. He smiled for the first time since the encounter with Brooks. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Maya's expression softened, though her resolve only strengthened. As they walked away from the fair, her mind was already buzzing with ideas. "We'll show them, Dad," she said with quiet determination. "I promise you." The sting of shame lingered, but so did the glimmer of hope. Marcus didn't realize it yet, but this moment would mark the turning point in his journey. The small, cluttered living room buzzed with Maya's energy. She sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through her phone, while her father, Marcus, worked quietly in the corner. His hands moved deftly, bending scraps of rusted metal into something extraordinary. Sparks flew as he welded pieces together, each touch filled with precision. To anyone else, the pile of discarded materials on the table might have seemed like junk, but to Marcus, it was a story waiting to be told. Maya looked up from her phone, her face lighting up. "Dad, I have an idea," she said, holding up the screen. "What if we post your work online? People need to see this." Marcus paused, wiping his hands on a rag. "I don't know, Maya," he said hesitantly. "Social media isn't really my thing. Besides, who'd want to look at this?" He gestured to the half-finished sculpture in front of him, its twisted wires forming the shape of a bird mid-flight. "Are you kidding?" Maya replied, her voice filled with conviction. "This is amazing. People love stories like yours. Turning trash into art? That's inspiring." After some coaxing, Marcus reluctantly agreed. Maya snapped a picture of the sculpture, framing it just right with the soft light from the nearby lamp. She uploaded it with a caption, "My dad turns discarded scraps into beauty. What do you think?" Hours later, the post began to gain traction. Comments poured in, filled with admiration for Marcus's creativity. A few even asked if his pieces were for sale. Maya beamed with excitement as she showed her dad the response. "See? I told you," she said, grinning. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "I don't even know these people, and they're saying such kind thing," he murmured, a small smile creeping onto his face. One comment stood out. It was from a local art influencer, someone Maya had tagged in the post. "This is incredible work," it read. "Would love to see more," Maya immediately messaged back, and within days they received a call from Claire, the owner of a respected art gallery in the city. Claire's voice was warm and enthusiastic. "I've seen your work, Marcus," she said. "It's raw, emotional, and powerful. I think it deserves a wider audience." The invitation left Marcus stunned. "You want to showcase my art? In a gallery?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. "Yes," Claire replied firmly. "Your story is as beautiful as your creations. Let's show people what's possible when someone refuses to give up." With Maya's help, Marcus began preparing for the exhibit. Days turned into nights as he worked tirelessly, crafting new pieces that reflected his journey. A sculpture of a woman holding a lantern made from shattered glass symbolized hope. Another piece, a tree with branches made from bike chains, told a story of resilience. "You're pouring your soul into these," Maya said one evening, watching him shape an abstract figure out of discarded car parts. Marcus nodded. "Every piece is a part of me. It's not just art. It's proof that there's beauty in the broken." As the exhibit date approached, Claire visited Marcus's small workshop to see the final collection. She was visibly moved. "This is beyond what I imagined," she said, running her fingers lightly over one of the sculptures. "People are going to feel something when they see this." Maya beamed with pride. "I told you, Dad," she said. "The world is finally going to see what I've always known. You're incredible." Claire suggested adding a personal touch to the exhibit, a short narrative for each piece, explaining its meaning and the materials used. Marcus hesitated but agreed. "If sharing my story can help someone else find hope, it's worth it," he said. The night before the exhibit, Marcus stood in the middle of his small living room, surrounded by his sculptures. His hands rested on his hips, his gaze fixed on the creations he'd poured his heart into. "I still can't believe this is happening," he said softly. Maya stepped beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Believe it, Dad," she said. "This is just the beginning." And for the first time in a long while, Marcus allowed himself to hope. The gallery was alive with energy. The soft hum of conversation filled the air, mingling with the gentle clink of wine glasses. Art lovers, critics, and curious onlookers wandered through the space, admiring the works on display. Bright spotlights illuminated each piece, casting dramatic shadows that seemed to bring the sculptures to life. Marcus stood near the entrance, dressed in a simple suit Maya had borrowed from a neighbor. He shifted uncomfortably, tugging at the sleeves. "I don't belong here," he murmured to Maya, his voice barely audible over the buzz. Maya grabbed his hand, her eyes fierce with determination. "You belong here more than anyone, Dad," she said. "This is your night. Own it." Claire appeared, her warm smile instantly soothing Marcus's nerves. "Marcus, everything is perfect," she said. "The crowd is loving your work. Are you ready for the big moment?" He nodded, though his heart pounded in his chest. At the center of the gallery was a podium, surrounded by his sculptures. Claire stepped onto it, tapping a glass to grab everyone's attention. The chatter quieted, and all eyes turned to her. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Claire began, her voice clear and confident. "Art has the power to transform, to take the discarded and make it beautiful. And tonight, we're here to celebrate an artist who embodies that transformation." She gestured toward Marcus, who froze for a moment before Maya gently nudged him forward. He climbed onto the podium, the lights blinding and the crowd's eyes piercing. "This is Marcus," Claire continued, "a man who saw beauty where others saw trash. Every piece you see here was created from materials most people would overlook. But Marcus didn't just create art. He told stories. Stories of resilience, hope, and the human spirit." Applause erupted, filling the gallery with thunderous appreciation. Marcus glanced at Maya, who gave him a thumbs up. He cleared his throat, his voice shaky at first. I don't have much experience with speeches," he began, eliciting a few chuckles. "But I do know what it's like to feel invisible, to walk through the world and have people look past you, or worse, look down on you." The room grew silent, the weight of his words sinking in. "I started collecting trash because I needed to survive," Marcus continued. "But somewhere along the way, I realized it wasn't just about survival. It was about finding beauty in the broken. And that's what these pieces are. Proof that no matter how overlooked or discarded something is, it can still shine." Tears welled in Maya's eyes as the crowd erupted into applause once more. Marcus's words resonated deeply, touching hearts throughout the room. As the night went on, attendees surrounded Marcus, asking questions about his process and the meaning behind each sculpture. Some shared how his story inspired them to see the world differently. In the corner of the room stood Mr. Brooks, the wealthy man who had mocked Marcus at the market. He clutched a champagne flute, his expression unreadable as he studied the sculptures. Finally, he approached Marcus, his posture stiff. "I was wrong," he said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "Your work, it's extraordinary." Marcus met his gaze, surprised by the sincerity. "Thank you," he said simply, extending a hand. By the end of the evening, every piece of Marcus's art was sold, some fetching prices he could never have imagined. But the true reward wasn't the money, it was the validation, the acknowledgement that his work and his story mattered. As the crowd thinned, Marcus and Maya stood side by side, soaking in the moment. "You did it, Dad," Maya said softly. "No," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "We did it." The morning after the exhibit, Marcus awoke to a flood of notifications. Maya's phone buzzed nonstop, and their email inboxes were overflowing. The world had noticed. News outlets ran headlines like "From Trash to Treasure," "The Artist Redefining Creativity," and "The Power of Seeing Potential Where Others See None." Marcus's story went viral, shared by influencers, celebrities, and everyday people who found inspiration in his journey. One video, posted by a young attendee from the gallery, showed Marcus giving his speech, his words punctuated with images of his breathtaking sculptures. The caption read, "This man turned garbage into gold and taught us all a lesson in resilience." It was shared millions of times within hours. Marcus scrolled through the comments, his hands trembling. Messages poured in from around the world. "You've inspired me to try again after years of giving up on my art," one person wrote. "My kids and I watched your story, and now they're collecting materials to make their own sculptures," said another. Maya leaned over, smiling as she read aloud a comment. "Your work made me cry, in the best way. Thank you for showing us what hope looks like." But the biggest surprise came later that day. Claire called with news that Marcus's story had reached an environmental nonprofit. They wanted to feature his work in a campaign promoting sustainability and creative reuse. "They see your art as a symbol of what's possible," Claire said, her voice brimming with excitement. Within weeks, Marcus found himself on stage at a community event hosted by the nonprofit. He stood beside environmental activists and artists, sharing his story with a packed auditorium. "It's not just about creating art," Marcus told the crowd. "It's about changing how we see the world and ourselves." As Marcus's profile grew, so did his impact. Local schools invited him to give workshops where he taught kids how to turn discarded items into sculptures. He encouraged them to think differently, saying, "Everything has potential, just like you." Maya played a crucial role in this new chapter. She created a short documentary about Marcus's journey, capturing his process, his struggles, and the joy his art brought to others. The film premiered at a local theater where it received a standing ovation. A film critic described it as a testament to the power of perseverance and creativity. The community rallied around Marcus. Local businesses donated materials for his projects, and volunteers helped him establish a studio space where he could work and teach. What had once been a solitary endeavor now became a shared mission, uniting people of all ages and backgrounds. Even Mr. Brooks, the wealthy customer who had mocked Marcus at the art fair, reached out. He sent a heartfelt letter admitting his regret. "You taught me a lesson I didn't know I needed," he wrote. "Thank you for showing me what true vision looks like." To Marcus's surprise, Brooks also made a generous donation to the new studio, asking for nothing in return. Marcus accepted the gesture with grace, replying, "We all have room to grow. Thank you for taking that step." The buzz around Marcus's work led to a new opportunity, a feature exhibit at an internationally renowned art gallery. Claire called with the news, barely able to contain her excitement. "This is huge, Marcus. Your work will be seen by the world," she said. Despite the accolades, Marcus remained humble. "It's never been about fame," he told Maya one evening as they worked on a new piece together. "It's about creating something that speaks to people. That's all I've ever wanted." The exhibit was a massive success, drawing crowds from across the globe. But for Marcus, the most meaningful moment came when a young boy approached him, holding a small sculpture he'd made from soda cans. "I made this after seeing your story," the boy said shyly. Marcus knelt down, examining the sculpture with care. "This is incredible," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Never stop creating." By the end of the night, Marcus and Maya walked home together, their hearts full. "Look at what you've done, Dad," Maya said softly. "You've shown people that there's beauty in everything, and everyone." Marcus smiled, his thoughts turning to the future. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. His art had become more than just sculptures. It was a symbol of transformation, hope, and the endless potential hidden in plain sight. Months had passed since Marcus's life transformed. His name was no longer whispered just in local circles. It resonated far and wide. But instead of letting success sweep him away, Marcus focused on giving back. The first step was turning an old abandoned warehouse into a community art center. It was a building most had ignored for years: rusted beams, cracked windows, and walls covered in graffiti. But Marcus saw potential, just as he always did. Maya stood beside him the first day they unlocked the doors. "It looks like a mess now," she said, laughing. "But I know you'll turn it into something beautiful." And he did. With the help of volunteers and local donations, the warehouse was transformed into a vibrant space. One wall became a massive mural, painted by neighborhood kids. It depicted their dreams: a tree growing books, a basketball player soaring through the sky, and a sun radiating hope. The centerpiece? A figure resembling Marcus, holding a sculpture made of discarded objects. Inside, the center buzzed with life. Marcus organized free workshops, teaching kids how to create art from materials they found. Broken chairs became elaborate sculptures, soda cans turned into shimmering mosaics, and cardboard boxes became models of futuristic cities. These kids are artists, Marcus often said to Maya. They just need someone to show them. One student, a 12-year-old boy named Jamal, stood out. He rarely spoke but worked with an intensity Marcus admired. One day Jamal showed Marcus a sculpture of a phoenix, crafted entirely from broken glass. "This is incredible," Marcus said, his voice filled with awe. Jamal's face lit up, the shy boy beaming with pride. The community center didn't just inspire children, it became a hub for everyone. Adults attended evening classes to learn about sustainability and creative reuse. Retirees came to volunteer, finding purpose in teaching younger generations. Musicians, poets, and other artists began using the space to collaborate and perform. But Marcus didn't stop there. With the proceeds from his art and partnerships with nonprofits, he launched a scholarship program for young creatives. "No one should give up on their dream because they can't afford it," he said during a community event. Maya also found her own path. Her documentary about Marcus's journey was gaining recognition, and she used her platform to amplify other stories of resilience. "Dad taught me that there's beauty in struggle," she said in an interview. "I want to share those stories with the world." One evening, as Marcus walked through the center, he paused to watch a group of kids sculpting together. Laughter echoed through the room, and the sight of their joy brought a lump to his throat. "You've built something amazing," Maya said, appearing beside him. "No," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "We've built something amazing. This is bigger than me. It's about all of us." The impact of the center rippled through the community. Crime rates in the area dropped as more kids found purpose in art. Businesses started supporting local artists, commissioning murals and sculptures. The narrative of the neighborhood shifted from struggle to creativity and hope. Marcus was approached by a national organization that wanted to replicate his model in other cities. They called him a pioneer, but Marcus humbly declined the credit. "I'm just a man who saw potential in what others didn't," he said. One day, Jamal handed Marcus a letter. Inside was a simple message: "Thank you for believing in me." Marcus read it quietly, his heart swelling with pride. It reminded him why he started this journey, not for fame or fortune, but to show others that they mattered. As the sun set, Marcus stood outside the center, watching families arrive for an evening event. The warehouse that had once been forgotten now stood as a beacon of hope, its windows glowing with warm light. He smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. Marcus stood in front of the sleek glass doors of a high-end gallery downtown. The evening air was crisp, and the streets bustled with well-dressed patrons attending the prestigious art gala. For Marcus, the moment felt surreal. Just a year ago, he was collecting trash in this very neighborhood, ignored by the same people now admiring his work. The gala was the pinnacle of the city's art scene, and Marcus was the guest of honor. Inside, sculptures and murals from renowned artists lined the walls, but the centerpiece was a collection of Marcus's pieces. Each one told a story of transformation, discarded materials molded into breathtaking works of art. His most celebrated sculpture, a phoenix crafted from twisted metal and shards of broken glass, gleamed under the spotlight, capturing the attention of every guest. As Marcus walked in, the room went quiet for a moment. Heads turned, and whispers spread through the crowd. The man who had once been invisible now stood as a symbol of resilience and creativity. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, his voice ringing through the gallery, "please join me in welcoming the artist who's reminded us all that beauty can emerge from the most unexpected places, Marcus Johnson." The applause was thunderous. Maya stood at the edge of the room, her camera in hand, recording the moment. Her eyes glistened with pride as Marcus approached the stage. He adjusted the microphone and looked out at the crowd. "A year ago," he began, his voice steady, "I stood outside these very streets, collecting trash. I wasn't looking for recognition or fame. I was just trying to survive. But what I realized was that every piece of trash I picked up had a story. And so did I." The room fell silent, his words hitting every heart. Marcus continued, Art isn't about perfection. It's about perspective. It's about taking what's broken and showing that it still has value. Just like people. The audience erupted into applause, some visibly moved. Among them was Mr. Brooks, the wealthy man who had mocked Marcus at the market. He stood in the back, his usually confident demeanor replaced with humility. When the applause died down, Brooks approached Marcus hesitantly. "Mr. Johnson," he began, his voice low, "I owe you an apology. I misjudged you, and I'm truly sorry." Marcus studied him for a moment, then extended his hand. "We all have things to learn," he said simply. The gesture wasn't about forgiveness for Brooks. It was about proving that kindness always held more power than resentment. After the event, Marcus walked through the gallery, stopping to admire his pieces. A young girl approached him, clutching a small notebook. "Mr. Marcus, can I show you something?" she asked shyly. She opened the notebook to reveal a drawing of a sculpture she wanted to create, inspired by his work. Marcus knelt down, smiling. "That's beautiful," he said. "You keep drawing, and one day I'll be standing in your gallery." The girl beamed, her parents thanking Marcus profusely. As the gala wound down, Marcus and Maya returned to their neighborhood. They stopped by the community art center, where the lights still glowed warmly. Inside, kids were busy creating, sculpting, painting, and laughing. "This," Marcus said, gesturing to the scene, "is the real masterpiece." Maya smiled. "And you made it possible." The final scene showed Marcus standing in front of a mural at the art center, a giant phoenix rising from the ashes. Beneath it, in bold letters, were the words, "We are more than what the world sees." Marcus gazed at the mural, his heart full. He had found his purpose, not just in creating art, but in inspiring others to see the potential in themselves. As he walked away, the camera lingered on the mural, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of transformation.